think as long as you're stuck with a narrow prism of India, you will never be able to understand the expanse and the ocean that is Bharat. That is my realization. Now, when we speak of India, the unfortunate reality is that it reduces itself to an entity. It reduces itself to a specific nation state. But when you speak of Bharat, it truly represents an idea. It truly represents the confluence of multiple spheres. So, for instance, India perhaps is at best a political entity. Bharat is the confluence of three levels at the very least in terms of our civilizational realizations at multiple levels. One, the spiritual. Second is the social. They culminate into the political, which means politics and political discussion is usually never the starting point of a conversation when you speak of Bharat. No wonder, as Sri Sadhguru mentions, you think of it as a civilization in the first place, and then you try and understand what makes it a civilization. I think over the last 9 years or so, India has been speaking of Hindutva a lot. And as a consequence of India's conversations with Hindutva, the discussion has been heavily political, forgetting that it is merely the topsoil and there's a lot more to this particular land and its culture and its civilization that needs to be revisited over and over again. The journey from India to Bharat is not a journey towards attainment of the so-called status of a superpower, but it is primarily a journey of self-realization and reawakening and rediscovery of our own roots, which I think is the biggest possible challenge that most people whose hearts beat for Bharatiya face, and that's the task that we have cut out for ourselves. I don't think I am interested in convincing the rest of the world of the greatness of this country. My primary challenge is to speak to my own brothers and sisters and try and tell them that this is the culture that you have inherited. And as long as the primary challenge remains, which is to speak with your own people, I don't think there is any further need to speak with the rest of the world. Because I have not been able to convince the home audience, so to speak, of the greatness of the civilization. Every question, rather every statement is followed by a but. It's almost as if doubt is the foremost sentiment when it comes to the greatness of the civilization, which I don't think really bodes well for any aspirations of a Vishwaguru status. If you can't convince yourself of your own greatness, what is the point of trying to convince the rest of the world? It doesn't work. At least not in my limited understanding of human psychology. I don't think that works. So what is it that animates Bharat? How do you define Bharat? Is there a particular concept or a single idea or a single word that can encapsulate Bharat? I would say Rita and Dharma. That's where the buck starts and stops. It starts with Rita, it then comes down to the practicality of Dharma, it goes back to maintenance of Rita. That's what it is. If that is the understanding of Bharat, how do we reduce it down further to its nuts and bolts? Today, the concept of Hindutva or the concept of Bharata, as it obsesses with Vikas in terms of development, it limits itself to a very material definition or paribhasha of development. What is the direct consequence of this reductionist approach to development? We speak of temples, we speak of our kshetras, we speak of our tirthas and our punya kshetras as places of religious tourism. And when a civilization such as Bharat reduces its punya kshetras, its consecrated energy spaces to places of religious tourism, I really don't think it speaks of an upward journey, it speaks of further degradation. Which means it has failed to understand its originality and its original approach to these kshetras, and it has chosen to impose the construct of development and the inherited colonial wisdom to its own sacred spaces. The concept of sanctity takes a back seat. The concept of convenience, facility, and comfort seems to come to the forefront. If you're truly a believer in the concept of Bharata, then you cannot but put stock in the notion and the belief and the lived reality that this land is an energy grid. It's a yantra in itself. Which is perhaps why temples are located where they are. Which is perhaps why before you consecrate that particular space and sanctify it by the invocation of the deity through prana-pratisthana, it is a calculus at work to ask yourself whether this particular space fits in the larger grid. So each time you disrespect Prakriti and you disrespect your devatas, you're not exactly living up to the ideals of your ancestors. And you're bound to be obsessed with the concept of Navanirman. You have no faith in the concept of Punarnirman. If you speak of Navanirman, you effectively divorce yourself from your roots. And if you speak of Punarnirman, you're not clinging on to some past glory, but you're asking yourself, how do I make my values, my inherited values, relevant to my contemporary reality? That is the right question to ask. Which is perhaps the central message that I've tried to convey through the books and my talks.